Yes, we do. Okay. So I'd like to call this meeting to order at 6:02. And we will start with nominations for Supervisory Union Board. Chair.
I would like to nominate Ann Beekman.
Any other nominations?
I'd like to second it if we need to.
Thank you, Kelly. Could we please hear a voice vote on the nomination of Ann Beekman for SU Chair?
Aye.
Aye.
Congratulations, Ann. I will turn the meeting over to you.
Congratulations, the right word. Thanks for the vote of confidence, everybody. I will now entertain nominations for Vice Chair.
I would like to nominate Kerry Amidon as Vice Chair.
Second.
Thank you. Are there any other nominations? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor of Kerry, please signify by saying aye.
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 Congratulations to you too, Kerry.
Is that the right word?
And I will now entertain nominations for a board clerk. Anybody? Anybody?
Do we know if? Do you want it?
Bueller?
Did I open my mouth?
This thing on the agenda.
I will nominate Tim Maciel as the board clerk.
I have to decline. Thank you, Kelly.
That's starting to look like you, Kelly.
How about this?
Yeah.
We need a clerk in what I believe to be true from VSBA. We need a clerk in name. The clerk does not necessarily have to be the scribe. I'm willing to be scribe if someone else is willing to be clerk to sign the necessary documents when they come across. I mean, that's what the clerk basically is doing, but I would take the minutes and be the scribe, and then the clerk can say, yep, you got it, and do the signature part. Does that work? So who wants to be clerk?
I can do that unless Deborah would like to.
I would gladly, I will agree to do it, although if you really want to do it, Kelly, you may do it. My concern is that I feel not overloaded yet, but to the brim with responsibilities on the SD that I cannot commit to taking notes ever.
That's fine.
Okay.
I have a question. Can the vice chair also serve as clerk?
I don't know. Isn't vice chair, I think, is optional.
Yeah, I think Vice Chair is.
Vice chair is optional. So if you guys wanted me to do both, I could do both, with vice chair being optional.
Sure.
Okay, someone nominate me. And I'm starting to take notes.
I nominate Kerry for clerk.
And I would second it if that's necessary.
Okay.
Actually, not necessary.
I'm going to assume we're not going to hear any other nominations.
We're out of people.
So all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you, Kerry.
Thank you very much, Kerry.
And we now need to establish meeting days and times. This board has customarily met the second Wednesday. Does that work for folks?
Works for me.
Works for me.
Works for me.
Okay, at 6
Good for me.
o'clock?
Okay, at 6 p.m.
Yep. Okay, great.
So we are ostensibly meeting once a month unless otherwise notified.
And I have a calendar I will hand over to Ann now. Yay, that's going on the list of Ann.
Email collection. Okay, I do not recall this board having any current committees, so
No.
if
Nope.
we need to form one, we need to form one, but we don't need one just now. Okay,
Can we talk about whether we're using Robert's rules for large boards or small boards?
If you'd like, it's customary to go small.
Because
with a-
fine.
yeah.
Right.
Do we need a formal motion? You want to just do it?
Let's just do it.
No, I remember at one point you stepped aside as chair
We
for the
hadn't-
vice chair to speak.
We
For you
hadn't
to be-
last year done
Right.
it, so I think you should make a motion, Deborah.
I make a motion that we use Robert's rules for small boards.
And since we don't need a second, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 All right.
Tim, you're in?
Yeah, I said aye.
Okay. Mhm.
Yay.
Thank you. We will go by Bob's rules, as Christina likes to call it. I would like to entertain a motion to enter consent agenda.
So moved.
Thank you, Kelly. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the minutes of February 8th, 2023.
So made.
Thank you. Well, here come more people. Sorry about this. I don't know why I'm running Zoom, but there we have it. So, is there any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Pardon me, I have to keep switching back and forth here. I'm going to make this motion just because it makes it easier. I'd like to approve the warrants of February 1st, 2023 in the amount of $393,019.94. The payrolls of January 27th, 2023 in the amount of $559,626.21. The warrants of February 15th, 2023 in the amount of $1,263,749.01. The payrolls of February 10th, 2023 in the amount of $572,406.86. The warrants of March the 1st, 2023 in the amount of $734,862.05. The payrolls of February 24th, 2023 in the amount of $569,732.03. And, more than one and. Warrants of March 15th, 2023 in the amount of $403,561.63. And the payrolls of March 10th, 2023 in the amount of $551,260.80.
Good job. Breathe.
Is there any discussion? Does anyone have any questions for Frank?
I thought I had a question, but it was on the warrants we got today, so I'll ask that at our next meeting, or I'll send it to you.
Okay. Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Any opposed or abstentions? The ayes have it. We will now go to public comment on non-agenda items, for which we have scheduled 10 minutes. So let me go back to Zoom here so I can see people. I am not seeing any hands. I gotta figure out a better way to do this.
If you want to share with me, I could go back and forth and give you an alert.
Okay,
We can
well,
always do that.
thank you.
All right, whether now or at a future time.
We are going to move on to new business and take it away, Frank.
Okay, thank you. I want to introduce Susan Grabowski. She's our food service coordinator at the central office.
Hi, everybody.
So happy she's been with us. How many years? Is it third year?
Oh, gosh. It'll be my third year in June.
Yes. And she's really helped coordinate quite a few transitions along with Mary Lou Steiner. Maybe Mary Lou's online. I'm not looking at online, but Mary Lou is also a vital resource in our central office, does many things, and one of them is to support the food service program, coordination and compliance with the child nutrition program at the Agency of Ed, and then also the USDA, along with our many partners. So we wanted to review two things under the agenda topics for new business. One is the food service program, so maybe I'll start with that. And the other topic is just where we're at in the transportation RFP process. The timeliness of this has to do with we did a complete bid process 5 years ago. June of this year will be the end of that 5-year bid cycle, and that is for both of these vital services to our school systems, and that's the child nutrition program, food service operations, and transportation to and from school, as well as co-curricular and special education programs. So I wanted to give you just a little bit of overview on our developmental process for the child nutrition program document that I shared with you. I think it was maybe Friday. So I think everybody's got a hard copy, and for folks that are online, Tim and Kelly, if you want to follow along with the document we sent out on Friday, that will be good. Otherwise, I'll be referring to a few pages in this handout that we have tonight. But a little bit of background to make sure we fulfill our obligations and the expectations of our kids and families. I'll give you an overview of a timeline, but I'll start with the deliverable July 1st of 2023. So by then, by July 1st, 2023, obviously we want to have a contract in place. We want to have given our vendor, whomever the successful bidder is, sufficient time to gear up and prepare for the summer food program that actually starts on June 28th. So going back from that timeline, assuming we want to give our vendor at least 40 days, 45 days, to make sure they have staffing in place, supplies, and schedules, menus, so many things that go into providing the services. We would like to see a board bid award on your second Wednesday meeting in May. So it would be May 10th. So, Ann will talk about we'll communicate on developing the agenda and make sure it gets warned. But I will make sure I copy Mo to let her know. Let's make sure we have bid award on May 10th on the SU agenda. Okay. And then just again, walking back from there, we need to give the evaluation of the bids that we receive some attention, analysis. So we expect to schedule the bid opening May 1st. That gives us a week or two. We'll talk a little bit about that criteria to evaluate bids. So we do have a bid evaluation rubric. So I'll talk a little bit about that, but a bid opening scheduled, and that would be a public bid opening, as we always do for our larger contracts, May 1st. Going back pretty close to where we are today, this document calls for a vendor pre-bid conference on April 13, a couple of weeks from now. And that's where we would expect all interested bidders to join us on site, and we would give them a tour of our facilities, give them a sense of the volume of meals, the 9 schools where we provide breakfast and lunch, and to some extent after school programs. So help them understand our facility, what they need to bring, what we can provide in terms of equipment, and so on. So that's April 13. And then that brings us back to tonight, which is I didn't want to distribute this RFP to our public and our, most importantly, our vendors until we had this review. So that's our board meeting review tonight of the RFP, and we will spend a little time reviewing the substance of that.
Can I ask, RFP?
Request for proposal?
Got it.
Yep. And yes, please do
Yeah.
ask for those definitions. So working back a little bit further, just to help you understand how we got where we are, this is where so many other of our stakeholders come in. I'll start with last August. Our food service oversight agency at the state, the Child Nutrition Program Oversight Agency, that really very much makes the weather, sends us the compliance requirements, communicates between the USDA and us in terms of what's reimbursable, what are likely revenue streams, what are the food safety requirements, and the standards that we have to abide by, so that there's an orientation that our folks participate in that's required, that we demonstrate that we have training in the various aspects of food safety and food management. So that's August. And then we have a series of meetings with our wellness activity group. It's a nutrition group that looks at nutrition, and it's a subcommittee that discusses specifically the food service operations. So we had meetings in November. We again met with the state agency in November to start the process of taking USDA requirements. And our system actually has been sort of the leader in the state in oftentimes taking their generic RFP and rewriting it substantially. It always has to be within a framework. We can't deviate from a framework, but I'll let you know a little bit more about the most significant rewrite that we've done, that the state agencies have been happy to have us sort of set the standard in some areas, not all. So that's November, series of meetings. And then I'm looking at a timeline Susan's shared with me, because Susan is very much the coordinator of these groups and the engagement of the various stakeholders. So it looks like we've had 4 meetings in late November and December. And if you want to share a little bit about kind of the substance of some of those meetings.
We went through what we previously had for a nutrition wellness policy and kind of picked it apart. And had a lot of discussions, whether it came to how long a student should have in order to sit and eat lunch, not including the time that they actually are waiting in line to get their lunch, to what kind of food we want to offer and not offer. And smart snacks is something also that it's not USDA required, but it's definitely promoted and what those are, and talking about those in our nutrition wellness policy, so that so we can include it in the food service, in the RFP, so that food service management companies are aware of what are our priorities. All of the school nurses participated on the overall wellness committee. We did have a representative from Fresh Picks, our current food service management company, working on the nutrition wellness policy, as well as somebody from Food Connects, our local food procurement company, or nonprofit, actually.
And if I could interrupt just for a moment, you've met her, Sheila Humphreys. She's the director, and she's presented to this board. Maybe not quite a year ago, she presented the award to Fresh Picks, recognizing Allie West for the just tremendous standard of service that she's provided.
And it took some time. The actual whole wellness policy, I think, still needs to be approved. So right now it's still a draft, but we need to include it in here, so the draft is in there.
The draft was shared at a recent school
Yeah,
district board meeting.
Yeah. Because our next meeting, Wellness Committee meeting is next week, I think.
So we'll talk a little bit more about that when we start flipping some of the pages in terms of what Susan is talking about in terms of the nutrition standards. But in terms of development,
Can I just interrupt occasionally
Sure.
and ask
Oh,
a
yes.
question
Yeah,
if something comes up? When you say policy, you said whole wellness policy. Are you talking about, what do you mean by the word policy? Is this going to a policy committee? Is it coming out of
Will be
this?
presented to the policy
Yes.
committee. Yeah.
Okay,
Remember Rebecca came to a recent board meeting and
Yes.
shared the draft?
yes.
So once the wellness committee tidies that up, it'll go to the policy committee and then to the board eventually.
To the policy committee on the SD level,
Yep.
or on the SD level, okay.
yeah, and we should, in this case, because the state requires food service to be operated out of the SU, we would want this board to adopt that policy as well.
As well, okay.
But we make you do the work.
But first, the policy committee on the SD side does the heavy hitting.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amen.
It makes sense given the structure. It used to be, that the SU board was much bigger than any individual board, and you did have subcommittees. But when we went from how many ever board to 5, a subcommittee automatically is going to be a quorum. So that's why we didn't proceed with that. So just a little bit more on the process to get to where we are today. After the internal work and an initial review with the child nutrition program, that's when Susan, myself, and Mary Lou incorporated all of this feedback that we've gotten from stakeholders. And then we went to work on substantially rewriting this template, the state template that's given to us. So we'll talk with you next about what that looks like. But the last significant event between where we are today and what I've just shared with you is our work it's required to be submitted to the Child Nutrition Program Office at the state of Vermont. And we are required to get their approval before we proceed with the document. So we have achieved that.
We have achieved that. We have made some minor changes, so it will need to be resubmitted.
We'll resubmit tomorrow,
Tomorrow.
assuming we proceed
Yeah.
here this
Yes,
evening.
right, unless there's some.
So, so now you have a sense of where we want to be, where we've come from, and where we are right now. So what we wanted to do is kind of give you a quick overview. This is a 117-page document, and I know for Kerry and Ann and Kelly, I don't recall about Tim and Deborah in terms of past review of the RFP and this process, but this board has got a version of this review every year because it is even though it's a 5-year contract, it is required to be reviewed and renewed annually, and meaning required to be considered for renewal. There is no obligation of the district or the supervisory union to have any kind of auto renew. It's a requirement that we evaluate the quality standards, the performance, the deliverables, and then choose to either renew or go out to bid again. Maybe one last thing to add in terms of stakeholders. I don't know if you mentioned specifically, but as we refer to Food Connects, we have met with Sheila Humphreys and Chris Nelson, her peer from Food Connects, and we're really pleased with the input that they've provided with this document. So, if you would like to look at our table of contents and that we've just added to the document. Give you kind of a glimpse at what's in here, and then I do want to spend a little bit of time, particularly on food quality standards, which is quite different than the state standard. So in your table of contents, you see right off the bat, because it's a federal program, there is a heavy emphasis on assurances around non-discrimination, civil rights compliance, and then a great deal about food safety and competitive procurement and the responsibilities of, we're called the School Food Authority, SFA, you'll see that acronym. So that's detailed out as to what our responsibilities are, as well as the Food Service Management Company responsibilities. So we can glance at those if you haven't already in your preview of this document. And so you see there in those first 10 or 15 topics on the agenda. And by the way, could we pass that around to Mark? I don't know if you want to follow along. Sorry.
Familiar with it.
Sorry, yes. So each one of these aspects of the document articulate the requirements around what you see there in terms of the menu, the meals, the requirements for buying in American products, standards around the fair labor practices, employment. Monitoring is a huge issue for all of us in the state oversight, kind of auditors, sanitation, licensing, emergency. We got non-discrimination. There's issues around trade secrets. There is an option, provisions for some proprietary information, particularly around the best recipe in the world. There might be a entity that will share it widely internally, but maybe not posted on the website. And then we have the summer food program along with the child and adult care program. Those are defined in the USDA kind of regulations. They're different programs, so they have different rules. Then we have a lot of attachments, and the attachments are actually maybe more substantive than that first narrative there of just because 1 through 26 requirements, they're very much boilerplate. And then when we get into the attachments, this is where we improve upon the minimum standards. Just to, again, kind of help folks understand what we're looking at, I'm not going to read all of the attachments, but some of the more significant ones, certainly the bid pricing summary, going down through, you can see a lot of stuff, things like disclosure of lobbying activities. Those are all those federal requirements around appropriate bid process. Again, going through the exhibits, a lot of data so they can understand the volume. So that's the school site data you see on the Exhibit A, so we can glance at some of these things. What we want to look at will be the Exhibit B, and specifically we'll spend a little time on Exhibit B9, minimum food specifications. This RFP and document, it articulates our meal pattern, our menu cycle, our services in terms of the various programs, whether it's a breakfast program, lunch program, after school program, summer program, and so on. So that's what how the document is organized. So Susan, I don't know if there's anything else you want to share in terms of an overview before we jump into probably what's most substantive, which is the food quality. You're good with
I'd like
that?
to do that. yeah.
Okay, so if we look at B9, which is on page 82, this is something that Brattleboro Town School Districts innovated back probably in 2016.
Yeah.
So when the Brattleboro Town School Districts were given the opportunity, unfortunately because of the high level of poverty, to become what's called a community eligible school, a CEP, we are eligible for the Community Eligibility Program. We said hip hip hooray, but instead of just same old, lots of sugar, lots of Pop-Tarts, and, absolute minimum type of food program. It was Andy Patchouli and a group of folks that had a very keen awareness because of partnerships with the medical community, nutritionists. This would be well-informed professional relationships and partnerships. Brattleboro Town said, well, we're not going to just take this subsidy that we're now eligible for and run to the bank, lower our food costs. They said, let's reinvest this in a much higher quality food program. And that's what you see here in our specifications. So the state gives us these minimum requirements, and then look at page 82, the bottom. I won't read through a whole lot of stuff, but just a couple of highlights. You see those bullets? Eliminate corn syrup and high fructose corn syrup from products and meals throughout the SU. That's expensive, but it's an enormous contribution to student health. That is not required, but we require it. Eliminate hydrogenated oils from products and meals served. Again, that is another huge deviation from what was not required. Eliminate trans fats from products. And then when you get into processed foods, you can see where possible, and in most cases, it's absolutely possible, we are specifying, that we're not going to be serving up what hit the floor and won't go to market, which is unfortunately too common. The sugar content, that is probably the biggest challenge in the food service program, in that food tastes better when it's got sugar on it. And ultimately, the food's no good if the kids won't eat it. So this is where there's a lot of innovation by having a partner like Fresh Picks that can experiment in the kitchen with different recipes. And you heard, I'm sure you recall, you've heard from Allie West coming to this group and talking about how that's why she won the award. She can do things with beets and carrots and stuff that we don't add sugar, but you put it in a muffin and the kids will eat it.
Hasn't Allie West moved on?
She has,
She's
yeah.
not with Fresh Picks anymore.
Yeah, that's
Right,
true.
right,
Yeah.
yeah, okay.
These standards guided her work.
Absolutely,
Right.
yeah.
And her successor, and again, this is a huge benefit of being with a food service management company, her successor not only has to abide, you can't come in, to our organization and say, well, I'm going to bring in a new way without being subject to the screen. And also, of course, that organization, in this case, Fresh Picks understands this is our standard. And I can think of Andy Patchouli going into the food closet, looking at the label and saying, this is not allowed, and anyways. So this is as I say, the state has applauded us for this absolutely increased costs But because Brattleboro town schools were eligible for community eligibility, it brought in 80% subsidy of cost, which made it fiscally responsible and absolutely affordable. However,
I would say these standards are the highest standards in the state of Vermont. I feel like I could safely say that.
I don't
Probably for a food service management company, I would say so. When we had in August, when we had our kind of initiation or introduction to how to put this together, they used our Brattleboro town standards as a minimum food requirement example of what you can do. Because apparently, I mean, this is what the state gives us, just this little table. That's the minimum.
That's the state.
So
and
all these
everything
other
for the following
pages are ours.
So through page 87 is
Yes.
what we did, okay,
Yeah.
okay,
We're very proud of that.
okay.
So it started with Brattleboro Town Schools, and we are making it for all schools.
And that's
in
the
this
big difference in this RFP and in this bid cycle, is that because we came in to this contract prior to being merged, you did have different standards in different systems
So this is the first RFP.
that we've had the opportunity to write.
Standardized for
Yes.
all
For the
SU,
whole
okay,
system,
okay.
yeah.
So for example, Vernon standards weren't nearly this.
Okay, so now they have to be.
Right.
Yeah. So we know that that's going to also increase costs. The reality, though, is that the Brattleboro town system was about a third of our total population, the elementary 3-school system. So, and the high school largely moved to that over the course of the last 2 years, which left, to the best of the food service management company's ability to raise the standard in Vernon, Guilford, Putney, Guilford and Dummerston. And so I don't think that we're very far off it in the old contract, but it had to evolve. Now we're going to start out the first year with the same standard for everyone. So yes, as I say, we're really proud of this. We do think it's fiscally responsible. It probably wouldn't have been without the universal meals legislation that has come through. That is still in question, right? I don't know if you have the latest and
This is where I always
greatest.
get lost, so can you give us the
It needs
food
to,
money for dummies 101?
There's a lot to it, yeah.
right now we have universal school meals, so everybody eats for free, breakfast and lunch. Right now, they're, and that was up just for this year. That was approved just for this year. They are right now in the process, so it has to go through the Senate, the state Senate. So we don't know what's going to happen. Fingers crossed.
If it happens, though, we are then covered for the school year 23-24.
Yes.
Is that, okay.
And hopefully beyond.
Beyond, all right, it's sort of a
Yeah,
1
but-
year at a time, okay.
But I think I haven't looked at the legislation, but what it said in last year's legislation is that there might not be state funding. So we'll see we will find out when it's all said and done, because there might be changes made. We don't know how much this is going to cost.
Right. However, let me give you, bugger.
Yeah.
I'm in the wrong district. I did want to give you a little overview of some of the major revenues, because I know it is confusing, and it's confusing for us in the budget development process, because we very seldom get the assumptions for building the budget while we're building the budget. We get those assumptions, sometimes it's a week before the school year starts. And, that went with the pandemic, but unfortunately, I think that happened to us again this last June. I think the Vermont legislature acted, it was either late May or June to establish our funding for the current year. And of course, we had already voted on the budget 6 months earlier. So let me just give you a couple of examples of the major sources of revenue that pay for this $2 million program. It's actually about 2.4 million. Just logging.
So as you're searching for something, to ask a really obvious question.
Go ahead.
The 2.4 million covers breakfast and lunch for every student in the SU.
Who accesses the program?
It also covers the summer food service program. So we do feed children over the summertime. And those are free meals. And we also do the after-school program at all of the Bratttown schools. So another opportunity for students to access a free meal.
So, Frank, you just said it covers every student
Who access the
who
program?
access the program.
Yeah.
So I was under the assumption that the universal school program enabled every student to have, without having to apply.
That's right, they have the
That is
option.
true.
But not every student actually goes through the lunch line. Some kids bring their own. I don't know if the seniors still go have their own lunch. Do they have the free pass to get their own lunch somewhere?
They do, yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
so it's
so
just.
they
that-
may choose not to.
Mhm.
But that option
It's there.
exists on a per diem basis. I mean,
Yeah.
right, they can
That's
either
right.
buy in on a given, not buy in, but.
Yeah, they can
Right, okay,
choose
just-
lunch or breakfast
Any given day.
any given day.
Got it, so you have to provide enough meals to cover everyone.
Yeah.
Okay, in the
Right,
system.
but I mean, basically, the food service management company knows, and we have a system right now in which students order lunch daily in the morning. So they know based on those orders how many lunches they're going to need to make.
Tim has a question. Tim?
Yeah, this is really interesting. I have a few questions. Nowadays, milk costs almost as much as I used to pay for wine. So,
And eggs.
yeah, eggs too. So how is the food service industry handling inflation?
Well, as part of that's a challenge for our food service management company. I wouldn't have advocated for what the bid format that the state requires, which is a fixed price contract. So what that means, Tim, is the food service management company has to address that within their financial resources. That has no impact on this year's business.
Right.
They submit a bid. That's the purpose of this RFP for each school year, and that is based on their assessment of the market and what it's going to cost them to deliver the meals. But ultimately, they bill us on a price per lunch, a price per breakfast, in a
Price per CACFP, which is the after-school program supper.
Yeah. So when prices vary, it does not affect us in that fiscal period. The food service management company has to address those costs. That's why we'll talk a bit about an evaluation rubric in a little bit. But that's why financial condition of the partner that we award the bid to is important.
Can I ask one more question?
Yes.
Food wastage is just a big problem in this country. Are there any innovative ways that you're dealing with food wastage to use for non-human animal feeding or anything like that?
Right now, I don't believe that we are. The food service management company would have to manage that. And
But there is a composting requirement that we abide by.
okay, right, because Brattleboro Town has a composting requirement. So there's that. but that's composting. In terms of some of the waste, we got away from this. There's something we call share coolers. So if a student gets something in the lunch line and it's packaged, say it's milk or a piece of fruit, and they decide that's not something I want to eat, they can put it in the share cooler, and another student who wants something in addition to what they got can pick it up. So that is one way of, because a lot of students, because milk is part of the requirement, they'll pick up the milk because they have to, but they'll put it in the share cooler, and if a student wants 2 milks, they can grab one. And those kind of went away during the pandemic, but we're trying to bring them back now. So most schools have or are getting share coolers as a way to kind of address some of that waste.
Also utilize the share cooler on their way home after school.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah.
And the way the system works now, are students obligated to, say, pick out a fruit item that they probably may not eat?
Unfortunately, for a lot of our schools, that is the case. We have several schools that receive their meals in the classroom. So they get all the meal components served to them no matter what. Here at BUHS BAMS, we do use something called offer versus serve, where there's 5 different meal components that are in every single meal, and this is required by the USDA. So we have a protein or meat alternative, a fruit, a vegetable, a whole grain, and milk. And they have to choose 3 of those things, and 1 has to be a fruit or a vegetable. So
a lot of us have been in the food lines, and it's just painful to see all the food wasted. But okay, thank you.
I understand. Yeah.
Can I piggyback off a question that Tim asked?
Sure.
Brattleboro compost. Other towns do not. Dummerston does not.
Right, he does.
Okay, so obviously if a town composts, then the school complies with that. But Dummerston does not have to compost, and they can't. Or do they on site? Can they on site, Dummerston School?
I don't know. I know they have a school garden.
Yeah.
That could be something that we could talk to the farm, if they have a farm to school coordinator, talk to the farm to school coordinator to create a compost. I would imagine that they have a school compost, but that again would require somebody outside of the food service management company likely to get involved. And that very well may happen. That's not something that I have to monitor. But I can find out if you want me to.
And Kelly also has a question.
Well, it's not so much of a question as I'm wondering. It could be a question. I'm wondering if what happens in my household also might be happening on a larger scale there, which is if we have a meal and there's something left over. We then might use that to put in with to make a soup, or maybe there's something else. So I'm wondering if that is I don't know about for hygiene reasons if it's possible, but it seems to me that if they're not entirely sure, they have some ballpark figure idea of how many students are going to come and get the lunches, but they have to kind of be a little bit flexible, that there might be some left over enough that they could do something else with that, and that might assist in producing less waste if that's possible.
Yeah, I know that if the food is not served, especially here, they often will take it back, and if it's freezable, they'll freeze it and use it again for something else. If the food has been served out, they cannot do that.
And served out.
Meaning that it's been presented or is served to a child.
Okay, but not that it's in the servery.
Right.
The servery, it could be
taken back and frozen or reused. That would be the choice of the food service management company. And I know that they do that here at BUHS BAMS. At the other schools, we probably have less waste of food that's left over and not served, because we do have students ordering their lunches every day.
Jim, do you have another question?
Oh, yeah, I have a few, but go ahead.
Okay,
I don't
your
want
hand
to
was
take
up,
up
so.
time.
The questions are very helpful for me
Sure.
to get up to speed. I'm just going to say that, Tim. So,
So I wanted to give you a little bit of background on the food revenue sources. And that's been actually challenging to predict because, as you know, the pandemic brought upon so many sort of suspension of rules and then new funding sources. It's been something that a lot of times we have to adapt to the new revenue stream. And I know, Kerry, you remember having conversations, particularly on the local budget assumptions. How much should each district, how much should each school plan on contributing out of the general fund, the school's general fund, to fund the food service operation? I mentioned about 2.4 million in total revenues. The largest single source is the USDA lunch reimbursement component, and that's probably where most of our materials, our labor, our the investment in material in equipment, and most importantly food and our the payroll. So that's about 800,000. And then the breakfast program is the next significant source, and that's about 500,000, 500,000. So you can see, just you put those two numbers together, that's over half of the total, 1.3 million. A significant, in the old days, the rest of it would generally come from the local budgets. And the local budgets were contributing about half the cost, a little less than half the cost. When these, prior to the pandemic, when these eligibility subsidies came in based on poverty, we were able to increase those levels of contribution from the USDA, but then the state started also contributing, and that's what allowed us to drop our local share down to about a quarter of the cost. So collectively, it would be a little less than 300,000. When I say collectively, Vernon and Windham Southeast School District having to go into the line items in their budget and contribute. For Vernon, Kerry, you may remember a figure of somewhere around 25, 30,000. For the SD, it would be 200 and something thousand.
So the poverty subsidies, both state and USDA, got us another $1 million?
Well,
you got us down to you got us 1.3, which means we need another 1.1. And you said we gave 300,000, so 800,000? Maybe not the math.
So the other piece I haven't mentioned, which is significant, is when a certain group of our students would have to pay. That was a significant source of revenue.
Okay.
Yeah, significant source of revenue. So then that's where the Universal Meals Program came in, the state program. And the state program in 2023, this year, said, hey, statewide it was 29 million, I think, and they said, we're not going to reimburse you all of that you used to charge your kids that did not qualify for free and reduced lunch, but we're going to subsidize most of it. And that's where we are right now. We are nearly break even between lunch reimbursement, federal reimbursement, and now a new state revenue.
Is that coming from the general fund or the education fund?
I believe it's the education fund because they've had a surplus.
Okay.
And that's what's still in question for next year.
Okay.
Yeah.
So along the way, as we move through the budget process, the year of the pandemic, we had already done our budgets and we had put in a contribution to collect money to fund the food service program. The pandemic hit and the USDA and the federal government funded the whole thing. That created a surplus in the food fund at the SU. And we have that in deferred revenue as a buffer to, if they decide not to fund the school universal meals, we need a resource, because we didn't put any money in the local budgets to fund the food service program. And we have a deferred revenue amount to cover that. So there's a little bit more about, how this is fiscally viable. The bid format is in those lines of, they call programs. So the various programs that are served, the bid will provide us with pricing in that format. So the last thing I want to make sure that we shared with you is the rubric. So how do we evaluate the bids when they come in? If you go to page 45, this is another document that 5 years ago, Mary Lou and I basically wrote this for the state, and they adopted it as the standard. What they had given us did not make any sense to us, and unfortunately, they've slipped in a couple of things that we would like to eliminate, but we don't have the authority to do that. So we are working within some kind of a framework here on page 45 and page 46.
Yes.
So when the bids come in, we said we're shooting for an May 1st bid opening. Because that's what I had. A committee of folks will get together. I would expect it would be well represented from the wellness committee, but it would also be, in the past, it's been principals that are very close to the food service operation. All the principals have to be, because it's such an integral part of the day in the life of a student. And certainly Susan and Mary Lou will be part of the analysis of, did the vendor meet the specification? Did the vendor hit all of the requirements that are in here in terms of food quality, in terms of management, resources, safety practices, equipment, and expertise, references, and so on. So we will look at their proposal, and we will check references thoroughly, and then we will assign points. And this is a requirement now of the Agency of Ed. The vendor, the bid award should be based on the way in which each proposal meets these quality standards. And just as a sort of a synopsis of all of what you see there, we were required to make price the highest point. I would not have done that. That's the thing I kind of object to, because we don't want to have a race to the bottom. We want high quality food. So that's why you see the next highest score is menu quality, meal and menu quality. We want absolute top-notch food quality. Mm-hmm. If you scan the document, the next high point metric there is local sourcing. So on page 46, you see that we're asking the vendor to commit to local purchasing, support our local economy and our farms. And then after that, you see our next highest level of scoring is on the tens, and documentation and record keeping. Unfortunately, we'd rather it's not that important, but if they don't provide us with documentation, we cannot get our claims paid by the state and federal agencies. And that is substantially,
It's important.
compromise if we don't get that. The next number 10 there you see is commitment to sustainability. Again, we would have taken points away from price and put it into sustainability if we could, but no more points. Got to be within 100. So that's that. And then the other, highest commitment is financial strength. And as Tim's question illustrated, it's a good thing we are partnered with a well-established firm that can weather some storms, because they've definitely had to, innovate to meet the inflation that they couldn't have predicted the extent of the inflation that we are seeing right now, but they are.
I don't know if this is a confidentiality question or not, but who has been providing this service?
This is Fresh Pigs. Fresh Pigs, yeah.
So Fresh Pigs has been
The food service management company.
for the past 5 years.
Yes. Yeah, okay.
Tim, you have another question?
Yeah, I'm wondering how we're handling cultural requirements, halal food requirements, kosher. We have more and more Afghans that have Islamic requirements. How are we handling that?
That's a great question, actually. Thank you. Twice a year, we have to hold, because we use a food service management company, we have to have food service advisory council meetings. And I recently just had one at BUHS. And actually what they did is they brought in the English as a second language students into that meeting, and they all spoke about some of the things that they would like to see offered. And I will be working more with Christy Gaines, who's the food service director at BUHS BAMS, on trying to increase the cultural diversity of some of the foods that we're offering, at least for this year. And we did not address that in here because literally that was last week, but I really appreciate your question. And I know that the USDA is also putting out more and more information about how to address some of that diversity in terms of cultural diversity in food. And we had one young man from the Dominican Republic who kept talking about how bland the food was, and the food service director asked him, well, what do you use to season your food? And he said, ghost peppers. So we will never get up to that. I mean, for him, our food is always going to be bland. But there are things that we can do to, in fact, we would address one right at that meeting. We said, well, could we have hot sauce as a condiment? And it happened that day. So those meetings do help in terms of students being able to address some of the concerns that they have, and we can address them. So,
and just one more question, if I may. Thank you for that response. I'm glad that you had
Thanks
that
for your question.
meeting at BUHS. Food traceability, should something go wrong, do you have a system for tracing it back to its source?
The food service management company is supposed to keep a pretty tight inventory. So they know where they've ordered their food, and they know where they also are required to have production records, so they know what part of their inventory went into certain foods. So technically, yes.
And that is part of the monitoring as well.
Yeah.
The monitoring will both do a nutrition check and a food safety check.
Yeah.
So maybe the last thing, if I could share on the food service, page 42, it's gives you a sense of the volume of the system that we are operating. And then when we actually get the bid, it's going to be very much summarized on page 42. And as I was saying, the bid comes in as a fixed price per meal or per breakfast or per after school supper. And just so you get a sense, again, 228,000 breakfasts is our projection for the volume that we expect the food service management company to provide, 257,000 lunches annually. And those are obviously our largest categories of services. But when you add it all up, it's 500,000 meals over the course of the year, whether it's breakfast or lunch or supper. And it's an enormously favorable impact to our kids. We've really come a long ways with this program.
So when I look at page 42, because I was wondering about this, so most of these figures are units, the numbers of students, or the number of meals.
Served.
Right, the number of meals. But then it switches off to a dollar amount, almost 75,000 for fresh fruit and vegetables. So you're not doing a unit count of that.
It's a separate grant-funded program, and it's an allocation through the state of 75,000, and there's and then the administration of that is very different. It's not a prepared food service, and there's even a serving.
Yeah, so
Serving regulation.
Staff in some of our schools actually take that on. In each day, there's a fresh fruit or vegetable that's presented. And actually the staff and the designated staff in the school actually prepare and then pass that around to the students. So, every week I get an email telling us what the different foods are. It could be apples one day, and it could be broccoli the next, and
Okay.
So it's like an added bonus of fruits or vegetables that are available to students.
And then after that, with vending and catering, those are units. Those
They
are not
are, but
dollar amounts.
you can see they're very small.
Right.
Yeah.
Mhm. Got it.
Yeah, the substance of
Right.
that you can see is lunch and breakfast. Yeah.
Is Putney in this RFP or?
No.
Thank you.
Putney is part of the 2.4 million. They're part of the SU food service program.
About
We
200,000.
and we do all of the reimbursement and reporting and all of the auditing and monitoring and everything we do for all the other schools. It's simply we don't contract for the chef and we don't contract for the procurement of the meals. We do that on site, as you know.
Thank you for explaining that to everybody. But I just had to check. You'll understand, as one of the authors of the Putney Food Program, I'm a little,
Yes.
I take it a little personally.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah, and they are very collaborative. Steve Head is very collaborative with Fresh Picks, and they support each other. As obviously they know we're the customer. We expect that, and they do deliver that. So that's our overview of the request for proposal to move forward with the food service operations.
And are you looking for our approval for this RFP?
It's not required, but I wanted to have this meeting, and what is required is, as I've said, you do need to vote on the bid award, and we would make that recommendation to you. But if you'd like if someone wants to make a motion to approve the RFP, it's always
It would be nice.
nice to have. Yes, motion to approve the RFP as presented would be helpful.
Do I hear such a motion? Would you like me to make the motion?
Who's fighting to do it?
So moved.
Okay, motion to approve the RSP as presented.
Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions?
Sorry, mine is an I. I just couldn't find the unmute button.
Well, I didn't hear you opposing or abstaining, so I decided to make an assumption there. So there you are, your RFP.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you so much.
So I just have a couple of questions that have nothing to do with approval or non-approval. Just post-COVID, when you mentioned apples, are apples touched by hands and then given to the child?
Yeah.
Okay, just checking in.
Often,
We
the
want-
food service management company is actually required to wear gloves.
I'm sorry, say it
They're
again?
required to wear gloves
Mhm.
when they're
Food
serving
and food shields.
Okay, so,
You know, the food safety gloves.
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
right. Okay, so that comes into play with apples and distributing food.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. And you began, Susan, by talking about the amount of time that a student has to get lunch, with consideration of how long they are standing on line.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering about that because it has come up with the Student Advisory Committee at BUHS. So,
We've talked about that too in our Food Service Advisory Council meeting, that it sometimes takes a little bit longer, especially if they're in the make your own sandwich line. That could take a little bit longer and they have less time to sit down. And I am working with the Food Service Management Company to try to address that and see if we can speed up things like that. Because those are the things that slow it down when they have, because the students don't make the sandwich. It's the Food Service Management Company. We have 2 sandwich lines. And Christy was saying, well, participation seems to be, lines seem to be smaller, but we can't decide if that's because less students are willing to wait in line. So we're looking into that. So that's one of the biggest things that seems to slow everything down. And in the beginning, there seems to be a crunch of there's 3 different lunch periods. And in the beginning, there seems to be a bit of a crunch and students will hold back. Actually, they won't show up until 10 minutes into that lunch period. And then they're going to have less time because they don't want to wait in line. But there's also fewer choices at that time.
yes, but either way, whether they decide to wait online or they show up later,
Yeah.
they have an abbreviated time to eat.
Yes.
And what I'm aware of is the lunch period is about 20 minutes.
It's about 25, I think.
Is it, okay, all right.
Yeah.
Because it's come up among the students that it's too short
It
a
is too
period
short.
of time and they would like more time. But then that becomes a
Scheduling.
scheduling issue
Absolutely.
on the side of the school. Right, okay. Yeah, all right.
So we the way we can address it is to, work with a food service management company to see how much more efficient we can get. Yeah.
And using those advisory councils to inform the school as well.
Yes.
Yeah,
right,
That
absolutely.
changes.
Right. Yeah, no students are online right now, but yes. I just wanted to raise that issue.
No, it's
Yeah.
come up several times because, especially, this is really, BUHS BAMS is really where that comes up the
Right.
most.
Right.
Because there's, it's the number of students that go through the
And
lunch
it's a
line.
huge cafeteria. I mean, in the sense of how many students they have to provide for.
One of the ways we address that for breakfast is that we have breakfast in the classroom as an option. There's actually a breakfast cart that goes around, so students can get breakfast after the bell, and they're allowed to eat that in class. That's actually something that the USDA has implemented. So I think that's great, but I doubt we're going to see that for lunch.
I don't know about the upper elementary, BU6, but at the elementary grades, when we moved to breakfast after the bell,
Yeah,
we went from like 30% participation to like 90%.
yeah, it definitely has made a difference. So students can know that they don't have to come in right, to get into the cafeteria. They can wait, get something from the cart that's going to come by their classroom.
And
Yeah,
it creates more of a community
Mhm.
around food, which
absolutely.
is,
Yeah.
which makes teaching and for the student so much better. Yeah.
Now, I know that students from some of the outlying towns had trouble getting there for breakfast because of the buses. Has that been addressed with breakfast after the bell?
All of the schools offer breakfast after the bell. It's a USDA requirement now.
I know for an entire year, my son's bus did not make it to this building for breakfast.
So a lot of schools offer, if a student it comes in late and maybe we're not offering food in the classroom, they can still go to the cafeteria and grab something if they want to. they can, and bring it back to the classroom. It is definitely, I mean, that would be a
situation. so-
absolutely. Actually, I know that recently happened in Guilford that there was a tree over the road and kids couldn't get to school using the bus. So,
Every single day for the whole year.
oh, okay, yeah, that is it. That's
P2 did not make it here for breakfast for the entire year. Fortunately, my kid eats breakfast, but
right.
yeah.
There are a lot of students that don't have the opportunity to eat breakfast, or it's just not available to them. Yeah.
Okay.
The other topic,
Do you mind if we just take a
No
5-minute
problem.
break?
All right, we're going to take a 5-minute break. It is 7:17. We will be back at 7:22.
the good news, this is much simpler. It will be a much shorter conversation.
All right. So thank you everyone for your patience. We are back from our break and Frank is going to talk to us about the transportation contract.
That's right. So this is also the end of the 5-year bid that we received from Kosmuskas, being the successful bidder from 5 years ago. They actually were awarded the contract over First Student. First Student had been the provider for probably 30 years, I understand, before my time here. And Kosmuskas has done a great job for us. Very adaptable through the pandemic. We've been really pleased with their services. They have abided by the contract. The base bid for the to and from school in the fiscal year 2019 was $1,100,000. The contract called for an escalator each year, and this year the contract is $1,233,000, which represents a very modest inflation rate. So just like the food service contract we talked about, they've had to manage the cost increases within the bid. What I'm exploring, and I just wanted you to be aware of it, I'm not asking for a motion or a vote, but what I'm exploring is the opportunity to extend this contract for a year so that I have time to research the electric bus, the electric school bus opportunity. EPA made an announcement about a year ago. I was hoping that we would have an avenue to apply, but we were not on the list of invited schools to apply for funding for electric buses. I had hoped a year ago I would have that opportunity, and then at this time I would want to move forward with a 5-year bid, but it's still an unknown as to whether we can procure or partner with an entity to procure either 1 or 20 electric buses. Right now, our contract is for 17 full-size buses to and from school for regular education and 6 buses for special education. So what I'm exploring, Mark and I met with Kosmuskas and Beekman Transportation Services just yesterday, I think it was. And the state of Vermont bid law, Title 16, Section 559, allows a board to extend a contract if a proposal from the vendor does not exceed the New England Economic Price Cumulative Index. And I was very surprised to see that's announced every November. It's based on the Joint Fiscal Office of the Governor working with, I believe it's Massachusetts and some of the other New England states to look at school inflation specifically. They announce that rate, and then I pass that through all kinds of contracts. The snowplow contract, there are other subsets of contracts for transportation. And if the vendor's done a great job and they are substantially either at or substantially below this New England Economic Cumulative Price Index, then oftentimes we will extend the contract. You must have heard by many others that we are in an environment where we are not getting really very good competitive bids. Folks are busy. They're making plenty of money on current contract bids. And so when I have the opportunity to retain a great vendor at a reasonable price, we usually secure that. I didn't mention the rate. The rate is 3%. So when I heard that, I was like, geez, I don't think these guys are going to be able to do that. How are they going to be able to propose a 3% increase in this inflationary environment? So that's where we're at. We met with them yesterday. We said what I just said, which is basically I'd very much like to bring to the table a new fleet that is an electric fleet to some extent, whether it's half our fleet or all of our fleet, or to whatever extent we can qualify and procure. And so in the interim, we asked them, would you consider a proposal less than 3%? And they didn't laugh us out of the room. So we were encouraged by that. I do think we'll hear back from them soon, because just like the food service contract, it's a similar timeline. We need to award a bid. Certainly not much after June 1st, because we have summer programs. We've got services to ramp up on July 1st, and we need a vendor that is ready to go. When we hired Kosmuskas, we did a bid award in May 1st, and they went out and bought 17 brand new buses and started services, a few weeks later. So it's something I'll keep you posted on, and it's certainly something that we'll have to address at our next SU board meeting. And it will either be, I will have a proposal for you to approve that extends the contract, or they'll say, no, we can't do that, and I'll have a full RFP. I sent you the current contract, and I will update that. I will change the dates. I will bring in any of the requests from principals around supervision of our drivers and updated routes and safety standards in our buses and all of the things that goes into that RFP, and we'll have to go through a competitive bid.
They expressed a commitment to electric buses.
They've done it, yeah.
They have done it, correct?
They have done. I think they serve a lot of Massachusetts, mostly Massachusetts markets, and we're right on the border. So they have bought 10 buses, and they have them in sort of like pilots. So they're understanding, the charging infrastructure required, the mileage capacity, the temperature, impact, and so on. So we're excited to
talk a little bit, Frank, about avenues of searching for money to help support electric buses.
Yeah, so there's the Federal Inflation Reduction Act. So I'm sure you've heard of that. It was passed by Congress several months ago, and like so many things, it's in the agency rulemaking process. And when those rules get written, which include how do you apply for the money, we'll be pursuing that as aggressively as we can. Kosmuskas was acquired by this Beekman transportation group, and they have a specific division for government services and grant funding. So they're organized to help schools pursue this kind of funding. We don't know if it's a matter of me. 2008-9, when we had the financial crisis in the country, I did this once before in a different system. I went out and I got several $1 million from the Obama's administration and the ARPA money, and I bought the whole fleet for the West River Valley, the 12 schools up there, and then I gave those buses to the bus vendor like Kosmuskas, and I said, let's have a mutual benefit. I'll give you 10 buses, you discount our cost so that it reflects the fact that you're not buying a bus. And it's a terrific benefit. It was also substantially reduced the diesel emission. That was part of the criteria, was to knock out the diesel emission of the buses.
Tim has been waiting very patiently. Tim?
Yeah, this is, well, first, I wish us all luck in the electric bus initiative. Good luck in that. But this is a question I've had for a long time. Do we give any preference to union shops in any of the contracts that we offer?
We don't dictate that. The current vendor that we have is a union, a union group that are the drivers, but we don't make specifications, and in a bid process, generally we're not allowed to do that. We can't restrict competitive bidding generally in public education.
Okay, Bernie Sanders would urge you to go with union, and my daughter.
As far as I know, First Student is a unionized organization. They were our prior vendor, and we know that Kosmuskas is as well. So I wouldn't be surprised if all of the bidders are union, but I don't know that.
Okay, thank you.
And Kelly, you also had a question.
Thank you. Frank, you may have sort of started to answer or what my question is. So you're talking about going and looking for money, for potential sources of money for this electric bus sort of project, if you will. Can you speak to, so if you were to get the money on behalf of the school, the supervisory union, how would you use that money to do, like you said you did with the West River Valley? Would you do that to get a discount on the cost of what we would be paying? So essentially our contract amount that we would be paying would be less, or would we own the buses? Or, I mean, it sounds to me like ordinarily you look for money and then we would own the whatever it is that we obtain. So, but it didn't seem to me like we were going to get in the school bus business.
That's right.
Can you just clarify that a little bit?
Yeah, I would not want to own them. If we can facilitate the acquisition, because let's say we're an eligible entity, as opposed to a for-profit business, maybe they are, maybe they aren't. But oftentimes, municipal government agencies like us are eligible for certain grants where other entities are not. That was the case when I did a similar project several years ago. But I would not be interested in owning buses and having to create a depot and invest in maintenance and charging stations and all of that sort of thing. I would only do it from the point of view if it was in the district's best interest, both from a climate point of view and fiscal responsibility. So that is the nature of it. Kelly, as you were saying, a couple of scenarios, and it would be the scenario where you were suggesting that if we were able to be successful in acquiring buses or facilitating the funding so that it was available, I would absolutely want to have a mutual benefit between the district and the vendor so that essentially we both benefit.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So you mentioned snowplows as being a subset of transportation. I presume.
A service with a contract.
Got it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. That answered my question.
Yeah, I could use a plumbing example. I could
That's
use
it.
a lot of different examples. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for all of that, Frank. Is there anything further you want to add?
That's it. If there's any other questions, glad to address them, but just making you aware that the next couple of meetings, if we have a proposal, I would hope that we could move forward if it's within the state law, and if we don't, we'll need to move pretty quickly so that we are ready to provide services, meaning quickly with an RFP, a bid process, a bid award, and address the whole issue around electric buses at another time when the market is more conducive to that.
Okay.
But based upon what you just said, at this point, the plan is to extend the given contract by 1 year so that you have some wiggle room to consider electric
Explore
buses.
this. Yep.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Are we good? I didn't mean to cut you
No,
off.
no, you did not at all. No, thank you.
Okay, I believe Mark has some new hires and resignations, retirements.
Yep, we'll start with 2 resignations, and I believe Mo, I hope, forwarded the cover sheet to you guys.
For the new hire, yes.
New hires,
Yes.
okay.
Did you
So,
get that? Oh,
Yeah.
Okay.
so we'll start with the resignations. Teen Bielsi, who is currently our district level math coach, will be resigning, and Kerry Dix is a district level or special ed teacher, as well as Ethan Jackson, special educator at Academy School.
Do I have a motion to accept those resignations with regret?
So moved.
Thank you, Deborah. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions?
Okay, and our new hire is Teen BLC, who will be moving from district level math coach to a special ed teacher at Putney Central School.
Do I have a motion to approve that hire?
So moved.
Thank you, Deborah. Is there any discussion?
I love that new form. Let me just say that.
Yeah.
To be able to see a
To be able to see, yes, I love that new
Yeah, I
form.
do too. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed or abstentions? Thank you very much.
Another win for Putney.
Because we are the crown jewel.
Well, let's slow that down a little bit.
Am I gonna have to get between the 2 of you?
That was going to be her crown
I mean,
jewel.
well, the tornadoes really did it for me. I'm sorry.
She's on Vernon's side, so
Yeah.
there.
Well, Demerston is first.
Yeah, okay, I see a little
Okay, thank
fist
you.
fight coming here.
Oh,
Good advocacy.
Thank you.
believe it or not, I think we are done. So I would entertain a motion to adjourn if no one has anything further.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I'm not gonna do this justice. There being no further business to come before this meeting, I move we adjourn.
Thank you. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed or abstentions? Thank you very much, everyone, for your time, and we will see you next month.